Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Andrew Ortega-Verdaguer, CEO and co-founder of IntelVasc. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard and Cal, for having me. I'm excited to be in your show.
Well, I'm excited just because I got past your name. I was so stressed about butchering it there. So we've got that out the way, and incredibly excited to have you on because you have this amazing intersection of hardware, software, sensor technology. And so I think, we've had some amazing AI guests on recently, but it's exciting because you are this true med tech product. And again, we're super excited to dive a little bit deeper into that. Before we get into all the technology, though, we do like to set the stage and talk about the problem being solved. So what is that big problem IntelVasc is looking to solve?
So, yes, thank you, Richard. I mean, the problem we try to solve is the cardiovascular events normally occur unexpectedly. Heart attacks, strokes are the first cause of death worldwide. And this inability of anticipating the problem is what makes it so deadly. So at IntelVasc, we were born with the vision of anticipating all these fatal cardiovascular events, so the prognostic will be way better and mortality to come to be relegated to the second or third place, not occupying the first one.
So a huge mission there and a huge potential, obviously, to create positive outcomes around some of the challenges faced. Can you dive a little bit deeper maybe for the audience around, what are some of the specific problems you're looking to address within the cardiovascular space?
Sure. So if we go to the main indication we are trying to solve now, the main problem is peripheral arterial disease. We try to monitor high-risk patients with this condition. Peripheral arterial disease affects over 9 million people in the US alone, over 150 people worldwide. And it's a huge problem, even though it's not the most well-known condition, because it's chronic, number one. It's an occlusion in the arteries in the legs. And 30% of these patients will suffer from a stroke or heart attack or a limb amputation after the 5 years after suffering this condition. So the outcomes are very, very severe, and doctors struggle with the follow-up of these patients as well.
And Kyle, I've got one sort of last question. I want to dive a little bit deeper again, because I think one of the problems, Andrew, you perfectly set the stage there, was around peripheral arterial disease is the lack of symptoms. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit more about, how it's diagnosed currently, because I think that'll set the stage nicely before we talk about your solution.
Yes, this is correct. So this condition, peripheral arterial disease, sometimes it's diagnosed by chance, by a routinary MRI, CT scan. Sometimes it comes with some symptoms, tingling or pain in the limb. Sometimes comes with another form because you didn't know you have another big cardiovascular problem, and we end up realizing that the source of the problem was thrombosis in the leg. So today, the only way to diagnose this condition is in the hospital setting. The gold standard is the Doppler ultrasound, the duplex, that a technician needs to manipulate in the hospital. And also the outcomes of these diagnoses, it varies as well from technician to technician. So it's not an objective science. So normally it takes the patient to be always in the hospital, and also the follow-up. It's quite standardized. Normally it's 1, 3, 6, 12 months after a procedure that has been performed to these patients. They have to they have to move from their homes to the hospital every time that there is a follow-up in order to identify the problem. So that's why we believe that it's a huge opportunity and an exciting opportunity to bring remote monitoring to these patients that most of them are over the age 65, and they have other conditions as well. So it's not the kind of patient that they have the easiest to move from their homes to the hospital setting.
You know, Richard, I might even have a couple follow-up questions based on your question, because I'm really fascinated, Andrew, with some of the comments that you're making here, because it sounds like the diagnostic side is it just sounds like, I mean, for someone to be diagnosed by chance because they have tingling or they have something, right? And then it sounds like they have to go through, you know, an MRI to really be diagnosed. I mean, geez, I just feel like a lot has to happen up front. It seems like the diagnosis side is another opportunity for improvement here. Now, it sounds like some of the comments you're making, though, IntelVasc is focused more on the monitoring side, though. So once the diagnosis happens, then you're helping monitoring, you know, that condition for the patient. So why don't we just start by talking a little bit about how that all works?
Perfect. So yes, there's a lot that we could talk here, and our ambitions are enormous at IntelVasc. As you mentioned, yes, once you have identified a patient, we can, with our sensor, enable this remote monitoring follow-up. But our ambitions go further, and what we would like to do, which is really exciting, is to create a technology that can anticipate any of these conditions before they happen. So take my dad, for instance. He has an occlusion in the common carotid. He hasn't performed, nobody performed a procedure to him yet, because the stenosis is not big enough. It's not large enough. So for these patients, you open the window now massively to a very concrete number of patients, which approximately is 1.3 million patients that they are followed or performed a procedure in the US with peripheral arterial disease every year. But there are millions of patients that they have other conditions. We know the condition is there. It just, we are waiting the bug to bite. And what most probably is going to happen is my dad will start having micro strokes. Instead of saying, oh, what a disaster, the carotid shut down completely, now we have to operate. Probably my dad will start having decline in the mental health, in his mental health, and that's terrible. So we can help millions of people to improve their prognosis. So answering to your question, how does it work? What we have created is the world's first sensor that uses ultrasound, which is the gold standard today. Today, the gold standard is the Dopplex ultrasound. So it uses the same technology, same basis. It goes under the skin, just right under the surface, and in the vicinity of the target vessel. So in the case of peripheral arterial disease, if we want to target these patients that is above the knee, it will be around the femoral artery, close to the groin. This sensor will be inserted under the skin during a surgical procedure. We don't require surgical procedure, but again, it's a way that patients with high risk who have undergone, you are performing a procedure to restore the flow in the femoral artery. So the doctor also will use this opportunity to insert the sensor, and then once the patient is discharged, it's going to be delivered, actually I have it here. It's going to be delivered with a scanner, and this scanner will be activated by the patient at home. This is the scanner. So they just have to press a button. The scanner is going to be activated, and actually I can activate it live. So you press a button, it's near the vicinity of the sensor, it activates it, and then the data is sent to the cloud. And the data is flow velocity. The flow velocity is what the doctors are using for diagnosing these patients today. So we are offering them the exactly same thing they are using. So we are not disrupting the patient journey or the clinical practice at all. It's exactly what they are using, just that they can have it at home, instead that every time they want to have the vessel health of these patients, they have to move to the hospital. So it would be a huge impact for better for the patient, of course, for quality of life, for the doctor, because it's going to be quieter knowing that their patients, they can do the scan maybe after the surgery every day. After a while, if they see that they are fine, the scan can happen once a week, twice a month. So the doctor can control way better the patients. And the hospitals, when they are going to perform, the surgeons perform an operation, they don't have to do a life-saving procedure. They can make it almost prophylactically, not prophylactically, because of course you have identified the patient has a problem. There is an occlusion that is going to happen if it hasn't happened, but it's way quicker to remove an occlusion that is fresh, that you have identified right on time, than just an occlusion that has been sitting there for weeks or even months. It's not the same to perform a surgical procedure in 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, than to stay there 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours performing an open bypass. Also for the cost effectiveness of these kind of procedures, both the hospital and CMS would get benefited from it.
Okay, and so tell me if I've got this right then. Current standard of care today, is there in fact some sort of implantable sensor that already exists? Is that no?
No.
What's the standard of care then for monitoring them today?
Doppler ultrasound.
So meaning they have to go in, the patient has to go to the hospital, right? And they have to schedule an appointment, go in, they have to have that ultrasound procedure done to see, what's going on in that artery. Is it getting worse, right?
Yes.
And what you're saying is you're going to implant a chip or a sensor in that area, and then they'll be able to scan it at their home, more of a proactive approach, right? Where then the physician, clinician, and doctor, what have you, is able to then get these results, daily, weekly, to monitor it more closely. Where, okay, hey, there's something happening here. We need to take a proactive approach at getting you in here to, perform a procedure to fix this before it gets any worse.
That's exactly right. So
I love
it. Yeah, you perfectly got it. It's not even a chip. It's a tiny sensor that uses Doppler. So sometimes people can feel scared. Oh, they are going to insert me something. They are going to geolocalize me, or get personal information. No, it's just a tiny transducer, and the only information we get is flow velocity in this target vessel from this patient.
Wow. Impressive.
Super impressive. And I know, Kyle, you did such a great job at summarizing there. I kind of wondered about the sensor you just showed us there on the screen, Andrew. How is that fixed? And where is it fixed? I know you mentioned about the femoral artery, but could you just tell us a little bit more about the insertion of that sensor?
Yes, there is an insertion tool. It's like a delivery system. It gets into the leg at certain angle, and the sensor sits on top of the serratorius muscle. For the audience that doesn't know where the serratorius muscle is, it's one of the biggest muscles in the leg, and it's a muscle that sits right on top of the femoral artery. So it's really close from the femoral artery. It's not inside. It's not even touching the artery. It's near. But the advantage of having it subcutaneous, because when we were thinking about the solution, we first found the problem. That comes from my experience in corporate. That I've been over 200 surgeries supporting doctors during their endovascular open procedures, and I realized that this was the medical need. But then we thought about solutions. Solution one can be implanted through surgical means. Another can be a wearable. And now it's, there's a lot of buzz about wearables that apparently can do anything. Not today. And the third one was the subcutaneous, which there's already a device called Loop Recorder. It's already a subcutaneous sensor. It sits here in the chest, and the doctors are using it for monitoring heart arrhythmias. And it's a device that has been extremely successful. Biotronic, Boston Scientific, Abbott have one, and they are selling over $1.5 billion. So a really success story into this subcutaneous sensor. So we thought that this could be a very good solution for us. So we tested in our preclinical test in cadavers, And every single time consistently, our surgeons could insert the sensor in the right spot, and we could get great data. And it goes under the fat. One of the big problems of the wearable, whether the patient has the legs smaller or huge obesity, if you have a wearable around the leg, it can be a big problem, right? So our sensor goes under the fat, and the serratorius muscle, this muscle I was mentioning, and the femoral artery, in all patients are in a similar distance, which provides us a huge advantage in terms of reliability of the data, which is one of the main problems, if not the main problem, that any of this kind of remote monitoring devices have, reliability. We wanted to tackle this problem right at the beginning. And that's why it was so important to create this top tier team of surgeons and engineers to come up with this solution and address this problem immediately since the device's inception. So yeah, that's a little bit the reason why we went subcutaneous.
Absolutely fascinating, Kyle. And as Andrew points out, this embedded technology is something that's becoming more and more commonplace.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty complex. For me, you're making it, fairly straightforward though, and easy for us to understand, which is nice. Now, because it's a completely new approach here, is this, something where are you able to do a 510K process because of the loop technology that you just mentioned, or because this is, an implantable now inside the body, does this make it a de novo, a PMA type of process? I'm just curious about this kind of regulatory pathway.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. It's a great question. So the loop recorders, they are class 2 products. So we can at least benefit from that because it's not a intravascular or doesn't require open surgery. It's a minimally invasive process. Procedure. You can do it in the outpatient setting. You don't have to do it in the OR. So it's a class 2. Now, we are going to be scheduled at the beginning of the next year with the FDA pre-sub meeting. But the meetings and the conversations we had already with one of our advisors, Dorothy Bell, she has been 32 years FDA regulator for endovascular procedures, already pointed out that we can be eligible for the breakthrough designation program, which would help us greatly getting this probably de novo approval that we need to get the FDA.
Sure. I mean, I would imagine that would be the case. What you're doing is obviously something that what it sounds like it just isn't exactly being done today, which is remarkable. So Richard, I think about, how Andrew plans to really get this product, in front of doctors and kind of what that learning curve looks like, what kind of buy-in and how that relates to go-to-market strategy, because I can see that, being a really fascinating part to Andrew's efforts in the future of IntelVasc.
Oh, definitely, Kyle. I mean, as we were touching on before, this type of technology is so cutting edge and it could be just so disruptive. Yeah. But equally, that makes the go-to-market strategy so critical and, I guess maybe potentially challenging because you're introducing something new, even though you can integrate, as you mentioned, easily into the workflow. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more now about, where you are in that journey and your current approach to getting this into the clinical setting.
Yes, no, absolutely. These kind of projects or products that are so disruptive, you could oftentimes you can argue that you can die from success. So you have to plan it very precisely how you are going to go to market. So the plan that we have, it's following, basically we can follow the playbook, the successful playbook that the loop recorders have already used. So we have advisors. Myself, I come from corporate, so I've launched over 20 products to market. So it's something that I really enjoy and like planning this go-to-market. Basically, you first have to select the cohort, especially you want to go through the breakthrough designation program. You have to select a very specific profile of patient. but also you have to select very well the institutions you want to start with. So normally what you do is you select which one from the big four states, New York, Florida, Texas, California, you want to start working, and which probably top 10 hospitals you want to work and launch your product through a limited market release. And that's what we are going to do at the beginning. We are going to go through the clinical evidence that the FDA requires. There are a couple of two different scenarios. One can be a very optimistic scenario where we might just require animal data and flow model testing to prove safety and efficacy of the device. Or it can happen that the FDA wants to see this device working in humans, which we are also ready to do. So depending on which path we go, we will start working with more or less hospitals. But at the beginning, we have already 19 hospitals who has offered the support and help, and they are really interested and engaged with our project. Which gives us, an advantage probably versus other projects maybe. But also we have really identified which hospitals would be influential hospitals, respected teams nationwide that work with peripheral arterial disease in large volumes, and also they have an inclination for adopting innovations. And with these ones, you start doing your first sales. Either if you have gone through break designation program, you might get earlier reimbursement. But otherwise, if you don't have an early reimbursement, you will have to start selling the device without disadvantage. But the device that to understand the commercial strategy, we have to understand the business model. And our business model is not only selling the sensor, but also to have a compensation for the remote monitoring. There is remote monitoring fee, CPT codes already available that are reimbursing $92 for these peripheral arterial patients. And this is already available and can be an incentive for doctors to use this device, among all these other advantages that, of course, a surgeon always want to operate knowing the information earlier, because it's going to project much higher clinical outcomes after the procedure. So with these two main sources of revenue, there is a third that we can talk later about the AI component and the prognostic. After we have a quite good source of data, we can have prognostic outcomes from depending on the patient population. We can talk later, but the main two at the beginning will be this one. We need a new CPT code to reimburse the device. And also we already have a CPT code for the remote monitoring fee. And if either of these two scenarios, we are prepared to go to market with these top 10 institutions we have selected. And with that, then we can start opening to the nationwide after we have standardized very well what is the sales process. We have increased the market share per hospital a lot, because now it's embedded this technology between the patient journey and the workflow of the hospital. Then after that, we have it really tight. The data is reliable. The doctors are happy. The patient is compliant. When it's not compliant, we understand why, and we are able to provide solutions. So there are many things that you have to take into account for your commercial plan. And we believe that we have quite well identified which can be the pain points, and little by little we are tackling them to be prepared.
I'm curious too. There seems to be maybe an AI aspect to your technology, which obviously is a hot topic. We're seeing this integrated with several technologies coming to market today. I'm wondering if you can maybe touch a little bit about, what that looks like, that AI interface, and how it's going to really, empower your technology to provide the best outcomes to patients and clinicians over time.
Yes, absolutely. So there are two main components here on AI or machine learning. The first is machine learning. As I said, these duplex ultrasound made in the hospital are required very trained technician. And even that, technician, when you compare two technicians, they might come up with a different diagnostic depending who is using the duplex ultrasound in the hospital today. So because we identified that as a potential problem, what our chief scientific officer is one of the brilliant minds in ultrasound engineering in the country, NCU, Professor Marie Mueller. She has come up with technology, with algorithm that is able to self-position the sensor versus the vessel. So the readings are consistently reliable, because if the sensor knows in which position which angle is versus in the vessel, then we can ensure this reliability of the measurements. This is the first component making a smart device that you can rely on even though you don't have a technician behind the technology. The second one, the most exciting, is the AI component. After we have been using it with several patients, we will have a database enough, obviously anonymized, with patients that we can measure by age, gender, other conditions associated to the peripheral arterial disease. And after several procedures, our device should be able to tell the clinician and the healthcare provider, this patient, because it has this age, hypercholesterolemia, this body mass index, etc., will have 80% of chances of a stent occlusion in 6 months, for instance. So you might want to personalize the follow-up of this patient with high risk of occlusion. Instead, this patient is younger, is healthier. There is 30% of chance of an occlusion after 1 year. So you will be able to personalize for the first time in cardiovascular history the follow-up of patients based on this information that our AI algorithms will be able to provide.
Yeah, no, this is like so exciting to me just because now, like, just hearing your story and how this tech works. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you don't want to just be, if you're the hospital, right? You don't want to be scheduling a bunch of, you know, random appointments, having people in for no reason, right? I mean, think about the amount of time that requires. And then to that point, it's like, heaven forbid you wait too long and you come in and they're like, oh boy, we got a problem here, and we've got to actually perform a surgical procedure. Now that's going to cost, you know, the healthcare system and the hospital, you know, X amount more in time and money and all of that, right? And so I just love how simple your technology is making it for patients and the doctors and the healthcare system. And then again, you know, I think you nailed it with the whole machine learning and AI, you know, for these doctors to say, hey, well, we've seen this before, you know, so they have a better understanding of what they're seeing, and they're keeping an eye out for certain, you know, seeing how that disease might progress, right? And so I think it's really really exciting overall.
You're spot on, Kyle, and let me add that the current state of care, patients, they require to stay in the hospital between 3 and 4 hours inside, just to be examined and to have the duplex ultrasound made, which is reimbursed $300, which doesn't seem a very cost-effective process for the institution or the doctor. And also the patient, 50%, if a doctor, it's, let's say that they are reviewing 40 patients when they are doing clinic in a day, 20 of these patients will be a follow-up patients that they don't require any care. Mm-hmm. So now imagine that from these 20, we don't have to wipe them out completely. Let's do just 50%. 10 of these patients, they will be quietly at home, and 10 new patients that require actually surgery or care, there will be in the clinic of the doctor, and they will be scheduled for surgery, which it will improve overall the prognostic of this condition, as well as the cost effectiveness of it.
Absolutely. And Richard, you know what I love about this is I think about past guests that we've had on the show, like Dan Rose from LimFlow and those technologies. And at the end of the day, I think it's really cool because we're seeing the OEMs from a device side, right, to remove these blood clots or you know, to remove that calcium buildup, whatever it is, right? they're trying to do it in a better, more effective manner, and they want to do it as soon as possible, as early as possible, right? And I just love, Richard, the tie between what they're trying to accomplish and how Andrew and IntelVasc is going to help, I think enable and empower more of those procedures in that early treatment stage, which is really cool.
It's so true, Kyle. And, I think for anyone who's not heard the episode we recorded back with Dan in spring, it's fascinating learning about the journey he went on with LimFlow and getting acquired by an artery. And, we were talking about this before we came on, Andrew, the fact that there's so much potential for your technology to complement what already exists, and as Kyle was alluding to there, but clearly you're just really pushing the boundary about, empowering not just the provider, but also the patient. And I think this is such an exciting space going forward we talk a lot about preventative care and the idea that we can actually better understand the potential for intervening at an earlier stage and taking control of our health. So I wonder if maybe you could talk a little bit about the voice of the patient. What's the kind of like that insight you're getting just now about like where's their mindset at with like getting this type of technology? Because ultimately it's non-invasive, but they're still going to have a sensor embedded inside them. So where are you now with that sort of voice of the patient?
So you just to make sure, Richard, your question is referring about what the patient may think about this technology.
Yeah, I think so. Just to talk a little bit more now, because being on ourselves immersed in the industry, I think we are used to technology and pushing the boundaries. But I'm kind of keen for the listeners to better understand, where's that kind of patient mindset just now about this type of technology?
Okay. Yes. Well, knowing the feedback that many of our surgeons have told us, coming from our medical director, Professor Adelman, or Professor Bismuth, Chief Medical Officer, that he sees these patients every day. The feedback that we are receiving as they are introducing this concept to them to learn more is like, well, if you are telling me, doctor, that this condition it's deadly for some of the patients, that it can come with an amputation rate, a stroke, heart attack. It's a severe condition, even though that they might have not heard about it before, and even though they might not have even symptoms. So sometimes patients tend to underestimate these kind of conditions. So when the doctor introduced them the concept, like saying, look, we have placed the endovascular stent on the femoral artery, but these procedures always fail. The thing is, we don't know when, but it's going to end up stenosing and ultimately occluding. So if you are diligent with the diet, the lifestyle, whatever, but also coming to your appointments, or if you have this sensor from home scanning, we can basically save your life in the ultimate consequence. And sometimes you might not even have to come to the hospital. What do you think about it? And patients, they have a very positive reaction. Of course, we know that cardiovascular patients are one of the patients that they are least compliant, and we are acknowledging that, and we are making the device, and we are making studies to learn more how the patient behavior works, and we can increase this compliance. But so far, the patients, they understand that stents or other devices are inserted or implanted because they have a severe condition. But if one of these technologies, on top of keeping them alive, it's saving them hours of car or discomfort in the waiting room or whatever, basically that's something that they perceive very positively. And now we are living a perfect storm, if you allow me to add that, because after the COVID, during COVID, we all saw, and that's when I came up with the idea. I started thinking 2020, all these patients, they were scheduled. They are not coming to the hospital because they are afraid of getting sick. But on the other hand, COVID created all this increase of thromboneogenesis. Many of the patients with COVID got cardiovascular conditions because the highest risk of thrombosis. So all the vascular community realized that what they have been working so far wouldn't be the most optimized process to follow these patients, because some of them, they didn't want to come. Even before COVID, many patients, they have lack of mobility. They live miles away in the countryside. They cannot come. So they need a way to get with hold to them. So telehealth was one system, but of course they need to touch, they need to see, they need to have vascular health objective data. So now all the clinical guidelines have been updated. The American Heart Association, SBS, updated the guideline of peripheral arterial disease for this year has been updated. Also, the FDA, it's giving breakthrough designation programs for companies that provide solutions for high-risk PAD, CLI patients. And both doctors and patients are more prepared than ever to welcome this kind of technologies. So our vision at IntelVasc, it's really that the medicine is going to go towards more patient convenience, more cost effectiveness driven due to the high cost of maintaining any cardiovascular system in the world. And these kind of prognostic AI devices and also remote monitoring are going to dominate in these conditions that it's so hard to tackle the problem early. Otherwise, it wouldn't be patients with 4, 5, 7 heart attacks, right? So that's what we try to prevent.
Very cool. And you know, the fact that you talked about that feedback you're getting from the physicians who are speaking to the patients, so they're getting that sort of first-hand insight. And as you rightly point out, you know, what better argument to say this is going to potentially save your life? I think that's a pretty strong use case, Kyle. And clearly there's a lot of packed into the vision of what lies ahead for Andrew.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and especially too, because I think some of the comments Andrew also made, again, it was in line with, you know, previous guests that we've had from Philips. You know, we had the CEO of North America on the show, and it was really cool because, you know, in their Future Health Index report, they do talk about also how can you help provide treatment, access to care to people in remote areas, right? So I thought, you know, that there's just always a kind of a common theme, right, with the future of treating patients, right, and the future of healthcare. And so I thought that was a big thing that just kind of wanted to point out there. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about the future here. You've got a little work to do, right? You're gonna, you know, essentially probably have to go through some sort of clinical trial with these patients, and it's going to take a lot. So tell us kind of what, I guess, that journey looks like over the next maybe 18 to 24 months, and what we can expect to see from IntelVasc.
Sure. So with our journey, it's quite exciting. In these next 2 years, we are going to validate the technology and optimize it. Now we are, as we speak, the team is incorporating or integrating what is the transducer ultrasound with the electronics. And we went through quite a breakthrough because TI has created very similar chips of what we needed. So we are partnering with them, and they potentially have saved us months and millions of dollars worth of development, having these chips already available, because they are quite complex. This ultra miniaturization of these systems, it's costly. So now we are integrating the system as we speak. We will test it first in humans mid next year. And with that, we are going to gather available data, which is going to help us to finally get the final form factor, minimum viable product by 2027, end of 2026, 2027, and get the, we'll try to join, as mentioned, the breakthrough designation program. There are other alternative programs that we are considering as well, to have all the options in mind, but that seems to be the perfect fit for us. And with this, we expect to have the product ready to commercialize after FDA approval by this year, 2027. So now answering about your question, there are, as I mentioned, several avenues that we are considering. There might be animal and safety data and flow model enough, or if the FDA requires to show clinical data with humans, we are prepared to do that. There might be studies that require between 60 and 100 patients. With this data, what we try to assess is the safety of the device and the efficacy, how it works. In the interim, we also plan a quite interesting test, which is a behavioral patient test, which is provided without any insertion, without any sensor, just to try to replicate how they would behave with the scanner and the app. How would interact if the doctor tells them you have to activate the sensor, do that, and upload the data so we can see it daily. And let's see the level of compliance, the behavior, how many success, how many failures, so we can learn even before we have the product to market. Really exciting months ahead.
Well, what's really cool too is like you can clearly tell like the whole user interface side of your technology seems super simple and streamlined. And I gotta say, I mean, just being on your website, it is so well put together. I mean, it's polished. It almost looks like this technology has been out in the market and it's available today. I think you do a really good job at showcasing, that chip, that sensor, and how the patient's going to use that the wand there, and then how it interfaces with the app. I mean, the app, even just some of the screenshots of the app, I mean, it looks really clean. This whole website is super clean. The technology's clean, everything. I mean, look at you, Andrew. I hope people are watching this video right now, because like it's amazing. Like, you are a clean, polished guy. You're on it, man. You are brilliant. You know what you're doing. And I got to tell you, man, this website is super impressive. So, I'm sure there's going to be folks out there too along the way that want to support your vision, maybe want to be a part of your journey, right? You might be looking for funding for people. What is it that you need from the community right now to help you through these next 24 months?
Yes, exactly. So now what we are looking is for talent. Now the team is growing. We have a team with 4 engineers, also PhD students, top in their game. We also have a vascular surgeon. So now the next incorporations will be regulatory. So anyone who is inspired about our vision and has also experience with this kind of regulatory approval processes. So we are looking for the right person to that. We are incorporating a marketing intern as well, who it's amazing lady helping us with the spreading our word and sending the message out. We are welcoming also any engineer that is really experienced in ultrasound technology as well, to help our team go even faster with this integration and polishing the data that we are getting as we speak with our preclinical trials. And also, as all companies, all startups, we continuously fundraising. Now we are fundraising extra $500,000 that we need to deliver on the first in humans. We are quite lean and quite optimizing our resources. So with just $500,000 more, we are going to be able to deliver this technology to test the first experience with real patients, which is really exciting. From there, we'll raise our Series A to get the clinical trials and the FDA approved and the system fully miniaturized. So these are the main milestones and goals in the fundraising. This first chunk to get the first in humans, and then further miniaturization and FDA approval. So we are really looking forward to accomplish these both fundraising milestones in due time. We expect to have by JP Morgan this $500,000 closed. We are going really well. We have raised 70% this month. So it's going to be just a matter of weeks, we expect. And we have shareholders. We have Mayo Clinic in our cap table. We have VCs like Growth Factory Ventures here in the Bay Area, surgeons from Stanford. We have really strong shareholders as well. That's why our evolution is going so positive, because it's not the idea alone, but the talented team that is integrated, not only the executive team, but also the shareholders and advisors who are supporting us along the way.
Well, hats off to you, Andrew, because you have really assembled a fantastic team, and you've articulated through this whole discussion, just as Kyle said, super clean, super polished, probably the most dapper looking guest we've had on the show. So again, hats off to you. You were speaking recently at MedTech World. What else have you got coming up in terms of events? Where can people find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yes, no, that's our contact is on the website. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm going to be at JP Morgan. Anyone who wants to meet and reach out, direct message to me through LinkedIn. And yes, after JP Morgan, I guess that the next big one is going to be Dana Point, LSI, and MedTech Strategies in Dublin. Unmissable events. But anyone who is interested, inspired, has ideas, knows someone wants to join, wants to collaborate, support us in any way, please reach out. Don't be strangers, because we are also learning and growing as we meet new people with new things to offer us.
Well, Andrew, I'm feeling inspired. I'm sure the listeners are as well. Exciting times lying ahead for you with the events and everything you're doing with IntelVasc. So thank you so much for coming on and joining us today.
Thank you, Richard and Kyle, for your kind invitation. I really enjoyed the time with you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Andrew Ortega-Verdaguer, CEO and co-founder of IntelVasc. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.